Jill, tell us why you are the right person to serve on Wilton's Planning and Zoning Commission.
Sure. So I'm the only attorney in the race, which I think is a leg up, especially because I have done extensive research on not only 830G, but the housing situation in Connecticut. I'm very well versed in Connecticut's long history with housing and how it has impacted our current development, and really, I guess, well versed in the deficiencies in not only 830G, but in our own local regulations. And I think it's very important, not only, obviously, I'm an attorney and it'd be great to have another attorney on the commission, but have someone like me who is so well versed in 830G be on this commission, particularly given the increase in different types of housing, and see kind of how that looks like, um, and see kind of what we encounter and see how we can be creative as we receive more of these developments. And, from the looks of it, we're receiving different types of developments too, not just the higher density apartments. And that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, especially because you are an incumbent, given the research and given your work, what would be some of the creative solutions you might suggest about 830G and about housing for Wilton?
So right now, obviously, all of the developments that we have been approving and have been starting to be built, they are helpful in the sense that they do increase our housing stock. But the problem is this denominator problem, which I'm not going to discuss too much. I think everyone talks about it ad nauseum, but I really think that the town needs to look inwards. I don't think that we need to rely, or we should rely, on developers to fix our affordable housing solution because, as everyone can see, that's not working. There's positives of 830G in that it does expand access to housing to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to live in our community, and that's great. But the problem is there are too many deficiencies. I don't think that the answer is relying on private development, and I think the right sort of solution does require us to be creative. And I use Darien as an example. They have their own housing commission, and they created their own senior affordable housing with town funding. And I don't know if that's the correct answer for Wilton, but I think something more similar to that, where we collaborate with the Board of Finance, with the Board of Selectmen, and we perhaps purchase our own land and create our own affordable, completely affordable development, whether it's for senior housing, whether it's a cottage community aimed towards younger people, whatnot. But I think that we need to look inwards and consider what we as a town can do with respect to purchasing something on our own and creating our own solution. Also, of course, that would help us achieve the moratorium under 830G, which would prevent people that were opportunistic, like the big Godfrey development, from coming in and taking advantage of us. It would sort of allow us to take our own power back, but also combat this housing problem.
As a P and Z member, is there really anything you can do about 830G?
No, I wish there was, but really there is not. The best we can do, I know everyone gets angry when I say that, the best we can do given what we have, and I'm right there with them. I'm also angry about it. I think it's very opportunistic, but I have done the research and there really isn't anything we can do unless we achieve this moratorium. And I think we need to focus more on the moratorium aspect of it because not only will that help us fight people who use 830G as this weapon, but also achieve more affordable housing, which we do need.
The town used to have a housing committee. I mean, if you're, how long would it take to start a housing commission? Is that something that the town can do quickly? Is that something that can get up and running if that's an idea that they decide to pursue?
In my opinion, yes. That's only from my own analysis of the case law and all the regulations. In my opinion, yes, it should be something that's very simple. I don't think that it's something that is very complicated. All it takes is maybe the quad board or even just Board of Selectmen and P and Z to come together and say, okay, look, we need to figure this out because developers are taking advantage of us. Our numbers keep going down, even though we are seeing more development. And I think it's a very simple and easy solution. I really don't see any large legal obstacles to this. So it also perplexes me. And I've started talking about this in meetings, although obviously it's not a huge focus. I think it needs to be more of a discussion because, like I said, we can use this to our advantage, not only to help avoid things like 830G and other restrictive state legislation, but also because we do need affordable housing.
I don't know how closely you followed the capital planning committee, but the first select woman basically said, well, we'll kind of hand affordable housing off to that group to sort of handle when they closed the committee down. I mean, is that viable? I don't even think it's in their purview.
I don't think so. I think that's more appropriately under our purview, which is why I tried raising the issue. And I think we need, I mean, I can commit to continuing to try to push the issue. Now that we have some downtime and that we have less large developments before us, I think now is the time, especially when we enter this new, we're going to be developing the new plan of conservation, assuming if I'm reelected, or even if I'm not, the next commission will be considering the plan of conservation and development for 2029. So I think now is the time for P&Z to focus on this. I don't think it's appropriately under the capital planning committee. I think it's more under P&Z with perhaps some board of selectmen and maybe board of finance involvement.
You are one of the youngest people who has served on the board, been elected. You've done in the 4 years since joining the Planning and Zoning Commission. You finished law school. You've started practice. Are you in a place? Have you thought about, possibly looking to do more leadership on planning and zoning?
I've thought about it and I'd like to, obviously if the opportunity arises, I know Commissioner Fenwick is not running again for P&Z because he would term out also because he's running for Board of Finance. I would like to consider maybe being the secretary, if I was reelected. I would like to see more of that because, obviously I'm biased because I'm a younger person, but I think younger people need a bigger voice in town, particularly with younger people filling his apartments, younger couples like myself and my fiance who want to move into the into the community, excuse me, because there's no representation for us. I think, Matt Raimondi has done an excellent job at kind of putting the youth aside, but also taking a youthful approach to the issues that are before us.
I mean, how do you think is a way to get, whether it's people of your age group or people who haven't traditionally been involved in municipal governance, how do you get them more excited about stepping up and volunteering, turning out to vote for, our annual town meeting? What are from your point of view, some of the ways you might be able to help do that?
I think we need to take the information that's before us, whether it's applications, just the regulations, whatnot, and make them more digestible to people. Whether that looks in the shape of maybe a newsletter or maybe some sort of messaging, I think that we need to make the material that is extremely dense more palatable to people that are younger. But also, I think, unfortunately, when people get angry about what they see when they drive down Route 7 or drive through Wilton Center, that also makes them get engaged. I think, part of it is on our end, we need to make this more understandable for people, but also people kind of need a prompting to be interested sometimes.
I know it's been an issue in particular with the Planning and Zoning Commission in terms of feedback from people that a lot of people say that they feel unheard or that they don't have the opportunity to give their opinion in public comment, that it comes very late in the process and it hasn't been welcomed by the commission. How do you respond to that? And what do you think the planning and zoning might be able to do going forward in your next term?
It's difficult because I totally understand the frustration. And if I didn't have an extreme in-depth understanding of the regulations and the way our applications work, I would be upset too. But the reason that we have it set up the way that we do is that so the entire application is presented before public can comment. And I completely understand, it's very frustrating to watch as a member of the public to watch a application get split between 3, 4, 5 meetings and see all of this feedback that's going on. But I do think that it would also be unfair to the developers to keep interjecting with public comment if they're not even finished yet and we're still waiting on different pieces because you're kind of putting the cart before the horse there, where if you don't have the full picture in front of you, of course, you're not going to be able to respond or have the correct public comment in response. That said, I do think that we can work on making it more, make it feel less one-sided because on the other side too, I'm sitting behind my town email and I'm getting these emails and it's like I can't respond to them because I'm not allowed to. It would muddy the application process. It would possibly be unfair, but it's sort of awkward because I completely understand it. It would feel so uncomfortable being one-sided and having these frustrations and trying to share them and have no one respond to them. I've tried to do my best to sit with residents, obviously outside of the application process, and sort of be a sounding board for them because I understand that a lot of these frustrations are not specifically directed to applications and more about the process themselves. And I think that we as a commission often forget that we are elected officials. people chose us because they want us to represent their voices. And if there's no way for us to sit down with them and have a coffee and even hear their general thoughts, then what are we doing? I know, unfortunately, there just isn't much room to change the legal part of it with the actual application. But I mean, we can consider other options too. I mean, I'm also willing to go back in person. I know that a lot of the other commissioners would agree that online is easier. I'm happy to sit in person if we have a hybrid meeting or even just talk to people because really what it comes down to is people want to be heard. Even if that's an informal conversation, people need that opportunity.
I'm glad you brought that up because it is something that, we've heard even people on other commissions or other candidates for other commissions say. Can you explain? Because I know that this is a phrase that people hear and they may not understand. From your point of view, what does unfair to the developer mean in the context of, yes, you are representing the public?
So unfair to the developer. Essentially, it's like if you're standing and you're trying to give a speech in front of your English teacher in high school for a grade, but the teacher keeps interjecting and you're never able to actually get your point out, and then the teacher grades you based on the incomplete portion that you said, of course, it's not going to be fair because the entire application, or excuse me, in this context, your entire speech was not given. And you get frustrated as a developer because in that context, you're not even able to get all the words out for all of the words to be judged at once, and it's sort of being cut off before you actually get to the point. A lot of it, though, is unfair in the legal sense, where planning and zoning is extremely different from other boards in that we have to create a very specific record. In that, if it was ever appealed, they would pull all of the public hearing transcripts, they would pull all of the court documents. And when you have public comment interjected in all of these different places, it can make the record much more choppy and unclear. And I mean, that could also be problematic for the town. God forbid if somebody ended up appealing and there was an extremely disrupted and convoluted record.
Do you feel like your P and Z commission has done a good job, an adequate job, the right job in terms of a vision specifically for downtown? Things like building height, development, architectural taste, maybe in some cases.
I would say yes. Although, I mean, obviously, I think the biggest oversight we had was with the Kimco and the affordable housing. I mean, I think that's embarrassing for all of us. There was nothing we could do, and I think the only thing that we can do is learn from that. But with respect to height, architectural taste, I personally like where it's going. I know not everyone agrees, and that's, of course, a personal choice. I don't think that we need to be shoehorned into this colonial, quaint little village, but I do think that we can appropriately move around that. Obviously, we have more modern buildings like the library, but we also have more modern, also kind of like a modern colonial, I would say. We just approved the application on Old Ridgefield Road, where it's not necessarily colonial, but it's almost more of a colonial flavor to a modernism. It's starting to look more like somewhere I wanted to live when I was in my early 20s. And there have been people, friends of my younger siblings, who want to move to town because now there are actually places for us to live. So for me, yes, although I understand it's not everyone's cup of tea.
You grew up here, right?
I actually grew up in California and my family moved here literally the week after I graduated from high school.
Okay. But still, looking ahead, like in 10 years and 20 years, if you're living in this town, what would you like to see it look like, especially the downtown? What are maybe some amenities you would love to see happening here?
I'm always here for more restaurants. I've said this time and time again ever since I moved. I would love to have a place where I could live above a Mexican restaurant or see more cafes. And we are starting to see that. We are getting more applications for more, I guess, fast foody, but little cafes and things like that. I would like to see more shops. I would like to see more of that vibrant commerce scape. And I think we are starting to get that slowly but surely. I think that we're kind of planting the seeds now with higher density housing, where in 5, maybe 10 years, we will have more of that vibrant streetscape that we're looking for. But again, it's concentrated in Wilton Center. It's not threatening to our 2, 3 acre single family homes. You kind of get the best of both worlds.
The Wilton Center master plan process has been completed. And, there was talk about moving up to Cannondale next. I think that's kind of been put on hold. Where do you think that the Planning and Zoning Commission should turn its attentions next, and where should that process head for any kind of, master plan for a particular part of the town?
So personally, I would like to next focus on the southern Danbury Road corridor because, it would be nice to have Cannondale be more developed. And I say developed in the sense that just see what we would like to have there versus higher density housing because I don't think that's appropriate there. But I would like to focus on the southern corridor because, obviously we've approved, I think, 3 developments there now. And I think that as those people will grow into the apartments that are getting built, they're going to need somewhere to shop. And also, I think it's more of a transition to Norwalk, and I think we need to focus on bringing people up Route 7 versus down because, as I mentioned, I moved here 10 years ago, and everyone just drives through town. So it'd be nice if there was a little place to stop. We did also approve that brew pub a while ago that's on the southern part. And again, as we get more people, we'll have more opportunities to grow the streetscape up. That would be my personal choice next.
And you mentioned that, we're going to be moving into that next phase of the next plan of conservation and development. So how have our priorities changed? And we touched on affordability and variety of housing, but what other kinds of things have become more urgent since the last POC was done in 2019?
Well, I mean, we did see quite a number of higher density housing flow in at once. And so I think the focus will also shift more to infrastructure, which is difficult because we do have state land going right through town. I think that the next POCD obviously will still focus on increasing housing diversity, but not so much in the high density housing sort of shape. I think it'll focus more on different types, such as condos. I always champion a cottage development. Everyone laughs at me, but I think that would be also a fantastic bridge. But I think a lot of this focus will still be in infrastructure because obviously a lot of the developments are still underway. Kimco hasn't been built yet. I'm sure it will be in the next few years, but we'll need something to do with all of these people. Right now, it's not an issue, but it may be in 5 or 10 years. And so as we go into the next step, the next POCD, we're going to need to look at how these people fit into the community. Literally, where are they going to shop? Where are they going to eat? Are we going to have more town amenities with new tax dollars? And look at that piece of it instead.
Are we going to have parking? I think that has become an issue. And a lot of the discussion is about how walkable Wilton Center is. I mean, over this last weekend, we just traveled to a town in Westchester. We were able to park on a street and walk 4 or 5 blocks and go into stores. And how is that something that planning and zoning can address over the next few years? Because that's probably, if you want all these people to come, where are they going to park to be able to walk around?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And we've started talking about that as a commission too, because there's only so much that we can require without violating state law and complying with those as well. I think, again, this needs to be a collaboration between us and perhaps the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance when we consider municipal parking. Westport has paid parking. New Canaan has paid parking. We need to consider either purchasing a lot as a town or finding solutions for these people because it is going to be a problem. Right now, it's not, I had to laugh a couple of times during the public hearings for a few of the developments in Wilton Center because people were talking about where are we going to park on the weekend? And every time I drive through Wilton Center at 11 a.m. on Saturday and there's ample parking, I say, oh no, I can't find a parking spot. I joke, but this will be a problem in 5 or 10 years when the people move into these apartments. And I do think this needs to be a collaborative response because we don't fully have powers as P&Z to deal with this. We can only do what the regulations and what state law allows us to do.
Well, especially I can now cite at least 2 examples in Wilton Center where they've posted signs that say parking is for customers only, parking is for patrons only. There's that give and take as well that, are you hearing from business owners and landowners about that too?
Right now, no, but I think a lot of that is just because what we've approved hasn't been built yet and it's not fully populated yet. I suspect that will change, and I'm sure it's going to be frustrating as private business owners, or I noticed that the library has a sign as well. It's going to be frustrating to have to either tow people or have your own enforcement mechanisms. But like I said, I think that this really needs to be a conversation beyond just P and Z because we don't fully have the capacity to deal with it just because that's not permitted under regulations, state laws, etc. It does need to be addressed though because it's not a problem now, but it will be. I mean, I can't guarantee, but common sense says it will be.
What would you like to see about the signage issue? I know that there's been some kind of flirtation with, you know, the commission hearing from the Economic Development Commission and their recommendations, but it hasn't really been something that's been, you know, that the commission has spent a lot of time on yet. Where do you think that, you know, there needs to be some flexibility or movement in the issue around signage, whether that is wayfinding or also for stores and businesses in town?
I think a lot of it is, it's frustrating because again, we have state land running through us and we can't really do anything on Route Center or excuse me, on Route 7, such as directing people to Wilton Center. I think with the new signage RFP, once that gets up and running, I think that will be the opportunity to look at this and revamp it because something needs to be done. It's very frustrating both as a consumer and I'm sure for business owners when they can't get business because people just can't find them. I cite the Point Break Taco as one of the prime examples. People had no idea it was there sometimes until it was gone, and then everyone expressed discontent that they couldn't even know where it is, so they couldn't have tried to save it before it closed. It's very frustrating, both as a community member, but also I'm sure as the business owner. I think that the RFP will do hopefully a good job at assessing that. I also think this is something we can incorporate into the new POCD and really make this a focus because who knows what we'll receive, right, in the next couple of months, years, whatever, in terms of applications. But when we have times like this where there's sort of a lull in applications, these are the times that we need to be focusing on this.
Could you remind me why the RFP was delayed so long?
Yes, well, I can't speak fully about it because we did speak about it in executive session. Part of it is just because there was a lull in getting all of it posted and there's different legal requirements for how long it has to be posted, etc. And then I think there were some problems with availability for the different um, bidders, and we had to get up and running with that. That's sort of where
That,
we're at. And then again, I can't speak to the specific delay because it was an executive session.
but that was partially about signage, but then there were other elements too in that RFP, right? That you were
It was
studying different areas you're studying.
it was supposed to be focused on signage. I don't think a lot of the people bidding on it understood that.
Hmm.
Is there a nearby town you think that Wilton should take a look at as an example of good planning and zoning management?
That's a great question. It's so difficult because, I mean, there's pros and cons to all the different towns. And obviously, I choose to live in Wilton, so I like it the best. I do like what Darien has been doing. They have quite a lot of new development that is occurring. I don't know that that's going to be great for their traffic situation. And obviously, our traffic situation is different. But I like to say I really like New Canaan, the downtown. It sort of maintains a little bit of that smaller charm, but they do have developments kind of in different weird areas. I think they also have their own affordable solution as well. Something between that and Westport. I know Westport has been having some rumbles lately, but yeah, I would say sometime I guess a cross between Darien and New Canaan.
And now looking back inside at Wilton, what's your favorite new building, business, or open space in town?
So my favorite, I always have to say, is Rise. That's my favorite application I've ever considered. Also the most delicious. But not only, I mean, obviously, they make amazing donuts, but I think it's a great example of taking what we have, right? It used to be Lang's Pharmacy. It's an older building and injecting it with something new that also honors and respects that legacy. Obviously from the outside it looks the exact same, but you go in and there's this quaint little business. I say quaint, but small, very popular. That's my personal favorite. I also like the aesthetics of Riverside. I know it's a lot larger than some people would like. I think it's a nice building. I think that Sam Fuller makes pretty buildings. Again, I like to joke because um, Tomasetti and Pagliar always say that we need to stay in our lane, not as architects, because I don't have the expertise. I personally like it.
What about if you could, bring any new public amenity to Wilton, what would that be?
That is a great question. I think for me, it would probably be a dog park. I know that's also controversial. People were looking at it for maybe putting one in town. There's always a thing. But I personally think that a dog park would be great. A lot of younger people have dogs, and I found personally in my own social circles that after COVID, people don't really go to bars anymore if you're young. And the new thing is to have dogs. People are having kids later, and instead they have pets. And that'd be the great opportunity for people to come meet their friends at a dog park, check out the town, and then who knows, maybe live here. I think that would be my personal choice.
The last first select woman would say that that's not necessarily the responsibility of the town to build, that she would always look for people to come together, put a proposal together, motivate the fundraising, and then bring that as a whole package to the town. Do you think that that's a model that, you know, right now with the people that live in Wilton that would happen? Do you think that the town needs to take a more active role in that, whether that's financially, whether that's organizational wise and planning wise?
I think it's a great idea, especially in theory. The problem is a lot of people will say that people complain a lot and no one actually does anything. I don't know necessarily that it would be the town's place to finance it. Obviously, that would be great, but there's other financial priorities in town um, that would have more priority. But I think that perhaps the town could take on the organization side if private residents or even a private company or investment company, who knows, would get behind the financial piece. I could see the organizational side, just because, it's kind of like a bunch of chickens with their heads cut off. And if we gave them the head, they could put the body behind it.
Jill, I'm going to ask you, what's your 30-second elevator pitch for why voters should vote for you for planning and zoning?
First of all, I just love being on it. I love doing it. I wouldn't want to be on any other board or commission in town. This is what I love. I'm very, very passionate about affordable housing. I wrote a 40-page article voluntarily in law school about it. I know affordable housing and the housing crisis in Connecticut like the back of my hand. I don't think any other candidate on either side has that background. I would love to be able to contribute to town in this way and continue to do so. And I would have really appreciated if people would allow me to.
All right. Thank you, Jill, very much.